with a woman in silk and diamonds staring at him like he'd lost his mind. "You're not my pilot. You're not security. And you're definitely not the man I hired to accompany me to Paris." But instead of kicking him off midair, she poured him champagne and offered him a window seat in a life that looked nothing like his own. And somewhere between first, he thought it was economy class until the jet took off without any passengers but him. Jalen was exhausted. 36 hours, 3 double shifts, 2 emergency codes, 1 coffee that had stopped working 5 hours ago. All he wanted was a seat, a window, silence. He squinted at gate 34. Or was it 43? Didn't matter. The boarding door was open. The flight attendant smiled. He tapped his badge, showed his QR code, and stumbled to the back of the jet, or so he thought. Except there were no rows, no crying babies, no announcements, no tray tables, just silence, marble floors, and a leather armchair that probably cost more than his car. He blinked. "Sir," a voice said, "champagne or sparkling water?" Excuse me." Then the engines roared. And the private jet, was in the air. 20 minutes into flight. The door opened, perfume, heels clicking softly, and there she was. Hair pinned high, skin like velvet. A look that said, CEO first woman, second, heartbreak third. "Who are you?" she asked. "I was headed to Newark. This plane is going to Paris. Then I'm definitely not supposed to be here." She narrowed her eyes. "You're not Charles." "No, ma'am. Definitely not Charles." A pause. Then, "Well," she sighed, sinking into the chair across from him. "You're here now. Might as well enjoy the ride." Flashback Jalen's life before this moment. He worked night shifts, lived in a studio the size of her coat closet, took care of patients, his sister's kids, and strangers who forgot his name the second they got better. Love. That was something he watched other people experience. In stories, in movies, in lives that didn't smell like antiseptic and cafeteria food. Back to the jet. "I'm Celeste," she said. "You're..." Jalen. Nurse. Tired. Very, very confused. She laughed, really laughed. Not a polite one. A laugh that shook her shoulders and made her eyes crinkle. "Well, Jalen the tired..." They landed as strangers, but walked into Paris like a memory waiting to happen. The plane touched down just after sunrise. Lavender light poured over the tarmac. The Eiffel Tower shimmered in the distance like it had been waiting. Jalen followed Celeste down the jet stairs slowly. Not because he was tired, because part of him didn't want the plane to count as over. "There's a car waiting," she said, slipping sunglasses over her eyes. "Do you want me to get my own?" "You're already in the dream, Jalen. Might as well stay until it fades." He nodded. He didn't want it to fade. The car ride. She didn't check her phone. He didn't talk about his job. They just breathed. Outside, Paris unfolded. Stone buildings. Bakers setting out fresh baguettes. Artists opening shutters. She turned to him. "You don't ask for much. That's rare. I'm used to being temporary in people's lives. I try not to leave a mess." "What if I don't mind a little mess?" He smiled. And for the first time since his shift started 2 days ago, Jalen didn't feel tired. The hotel. Not a hotel. A penthouse suite with gold trim and fresh roses. "You don't have to stay," she said, unzipping her coat. This was all accidental. So was gravity. But we make it work. She stared. "You keep saying things that sound like lines, but they land like truths." "I don't know how to lie, pretty," he shrugged. "I just notice stuff people ignore." Flashback Celeste. 2 years ago. Alone in a ballroom. Caterers cleared the table where her fiancé never showed. She signed the breakup papers herself. She swore then, "No more saving men who don't choose me first." But now, here was a stranger. No suit, no script, no expectations, just soft hands that had healed hundreds, and eyes that saw through the glitter and glass. Later that night on the balcony, they sipped wine, shared croissants, talked about childhood heartbreak and favorite sounds. "Mine's laughter under blankets," he said. "Mine's someone making coffee just because they know you'll need it," she replied. A pause. Then, "Stay for one more day," she whispered. "What happens after?" She didn't answer. She didn't know. But as she leaned against his shoulder, the city below, twinkling with stories they hadn't lived yet, neither wanted this one to end. He was supposed to be gone by morning, but she didn't want to wake up without him. The sun poured through the French windows. Birdsong, coffee, the city humming below. Jalen stood in the kitchen barefoot, stirring a pot of something he barely knew how to pronounce. Celeste watched him from across the room, wrapped in a robe, silent, unreadable. "You cook now?" she asked, half smiling. "I survive," he said. "Cooking's just one of the ways I do it." She raised an eyebrow. "Survival doesn't usually smell this good." "Try me." He plated a clumsy omelet, handed it to her with a spoon instead of a fork. She laughed for the first time that day. Maybe the first time that year. "You're not like anyone I know." "That's because I'm not trying to impress you." "Good. I'm exhausted from being impressed." Flashback Celeste's past lovers. Diamonds, jets, declarations. Men who sent flowers from assistants' desks. Men who bought her affection the way they bought stocks with risk and no romance. But none of them made breakfast barefoot. None of them stood still when the room was quiet. None of them just stayed. Back to present. They wandered the city that afternoon. No headlines, no heels, just laughter between pastries and borrowed umbrellas. People stared at the beautiful woman in designer sunglasses, holding hands with a man who looked like he'd just left the night shift. She didn't care. She squeezed his fingers tighter. Inside a bookstore in Le Marais, they paused in front of a weathered copy of The Little Prince. "Have you read it?" she asked. "Once, in nursing school. A professor told me it's what grief sounds like in a child's voice. It's what loneliness sounds like in a grown woman's." She opened the book, slipped something inside. "That's for later," she said, smirking. He didn't ask, but her eyes softened in a way that said, "Thank you for not needing to know everything to stay." That night in the suite, they didn't kiss. They didn't need to. They lay side by side, talking about nothing, letting silence hold space. "What do you think this is?" he asked. "Something beautiful that scares me." "Me too." She turned to him. "Jalen, if this ends tomorrow, I just want you to know." He stopped her with a hand on hers. "Let it begin instead. Because sometimes the most honest things in life are born in rooms where nobody planned to fall in love." Paris was never part of his life, but she was starting to feel like home. They visited Montmartre at sunset. The air was thin and gold. Tourists huddled near painters. Street musicians played Edith Piaf on a violin that sang to the cobblestones. Jalen didn't speak much. Not because he had nothing to say, but because everything in him wanted to memorize the way she looked in that light. "You okay?" Celeste asked, slipping her arm through his. "Yeah," he said, "just trying to remember this forever." She smiled a little too quickly and looked away, because forever wasn't something she believed in. Until now. Flashback Celeste in her boardroom. PowerPoint decks. Wall Street numbers. 50 board members hanging on her words. She owned companies. She crushed competition. She silenced rooms. But she had never been held. Not until a nurse with quiet eyes stood beside her like she wasn't someone to conquer, but someone worth knowing. That night, dinner on the rooftop. The Eiffel Tower lit up behind them. Candles flickered. A violinist played below. The city glowed like it had opened just for them. "What's your dream?" she asked suddenly. He blinked. "Honestly, I don't dream much. I work. I pay rent. I try not to lose anyone." "You mean patience?" I mean, everyone. She looked at him, really looked, then whispered, "Dream with me, Jalen, just once, right now." He took a breath. "Okay, I'm 50. You're beside me. We're in a kitchen, not a hotel. A kid's yelling in the background. You're barefoot again. I'm burning toast. And we're still laughing." Her eyes filled before she could stop them. "You dream small," she whispered. "No," he said softly. "I dream close." Later that night, in the quiet between stories and sips of wine, she handed him the book from the bookstore, The Little Prince. Inside was a note. "What is essential is invisible to the eye." And beneath it, her own handwriting. "I didn't know how lonely I was until I met you." She didn't wait for him to respond. She just leaned into his shoulder and whispered, "I don't want this to be pretend anymore." He kissed her temple. "Then let's make it real. Whatever real looks like." She had all the power, but he made her feel safe. They spent the next day walking without a plan. No paparazzi, no headlines. Just two people trying to slow down time in a city that never rushes love. They shared a crepe in Montparnasse, got lost near the Seine, danced quietly to a jazz trio in a narrow alley. "I forgot I could feel this light," Celeste said, holding his hand under the cafe awning. "I forgot I could feel seen," Jalen replied. Flashback Jalen, a year ago. Long shifts, patience coded, nobody to come home to. He once sat in his apartment with a cold plate of spaghetti and whispered, "I don't want to be invisible anymore." Now in Paris she saw him before he spoke. And somehow, she looked at him like she'd been waiting for him all along. Back to present inside a small Parisian chapel. They ducked inside when the rain started. No crowd, no mass, just silence and stained glass. She lit a candle. "For my mother," she said. "She died before I became all this. Would she be proud?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I built walls so high she might not recognize me anymore." He lit a second candle. "Then let's leave a little light for who you were before the walls." Her eyes shimmered. That night back in the suite, there was no script, no need to impress. He held her like he'd always known her. She let go, like no one had ever asked her to stay soft. And when she whispered, "This isn't a fairy tale," he answered, "No, it's better. It's real." They fell asleep tangled, quiet, safe. And for the first time in years, Celeste didn't wake up from dreams of being abandoned. Because she wasn't. The next morning, reality waited. There were emails, board meetings, a jet scheduled to leave in 24 hours. But she turned to him and asked, "Do you want to fly back with me?" "To what?" "To us." He didn't smile. He reached for her hand. "Only if we stop pretending this ends when we land." She nodded. And in her heart, a vow she never made out loud began to bloom. "I will not let fear ruin something this gentle again." They left Paris as something unnamed, but landed as something undeniable. The jet was waiting. Same crew, same soft leather seats, same champagne tray. But everything felt different now. Because this time, Jalen didn't feel like an accident. He felt like an invitation. And Celeste looked nervous. Not the boardroom kind of nervous. The kind you feel when you're about to offer your heart without asking for anything back. Flashback Celeste, age 16. Her father once told her, "Power means never needing anyone. Don't let anyone think you're soft." So she built herself into titanium. Until Jalen. Until someone held her hand and didn't try to control it. Until someone touched her without trying to take. Back on the jet. They sat side by side. The sky stretched wide outside their window. "We don't have to define this," Celeste whispered. "We don't," Jalen agreed. "But I still want to fight for it. Even if I'm difficult. Especially if you are." She laughed softly. "You say things that make me want to believe in things I gave up on." He looked at her then, not like a nurse, not like a man out of place, but like someone who finally saw where he belonged. Back in New York, the car met them at the hangar. Two different realities waited in the back seat. For her, a portfolio review, 2 board calls, and a designer gala. For him, scrubs folded in his backpack and an early shift at the hospital in 6 hours. But neither moved. "Do you want to come with me?" she asked quietly. "To where?" "To the part of my life that's terrifying." He reached for her hand. "Only if you'll let me bring the part of mine that's tired, honest, and messy." She smiled. "That's all I've ever needed." Flash forward a few weeks later. He cooked breakfast in her penthouse kitchen. Burnt toast. Coffee spilled on marble counters. She walked in barefoot, hair-messy robe, half-tied. He turned and smiled. "Told you I wasn't fancy." She kissed him without answering. Because home wasn't chandeliers or jet fuel anymore. Home was a man who missed his gate and landed in her heart, and she had built a world without room for mistakes. But he was the one thing she never regretted. 3 weeks had passed. No planes, no candlelit rooftop dinners, just city traffic, morning alarms, and mismatched lives trying to sync. Jalen worked nights again. Celeste ran empires by day. Sometimes they passed like strangers in their own hallway. Sometimes they held hands at 3 a.m., stealing 10 minutes before the world spun again. But something had changed. The spark had stayed, but reality was knocking. One evening in her study, Celeste stared at her schedule. Board meeting, gala, media interview. Jalen sat across from her, quietly folding laundry. She looked up. "This isn't the part they show in love stories." "That's because this is the part that matters," he said. "The part where you choose each other, even when it's not magical." Flashback Jalen's foster home. He learned young that people leave. When things got loud, when he got sick, when they just didn't want to try anymore. But Celeste, she stayed. Even when he burned dinner. Even when he said the wrong thing. Even when his world felt too small for hers. Back to present. They argued that night. Small things. Schedules, voicemails, forgotten lunch plans. But the real fear sat beneath it. What if this was just Paris magic? What if they were only ever meant to last one flight? He nearly left. She nearly let him. Until she opened her bedroom drawer and pulled out The Little Prince. Still tucked with the note he never saw. "You're not what I planned, but you're exactly what I needed." She found him in the kitchen, keys in hand. "Stay," she said, trembling. "Not for the fantasy, for the mess, for the truth. Only if we stop pretending this is supposed to be perfect." "I don't need perfect," she whispered. "I just need you." That night, they slept like gravity had finally calmed. Not holding on out of fear, but because nothing else had ever felt this right. They met by mistake, but stayed by choice. 6 months later, the world had adjusted. Not to them, but for them. Celeste still ran Empire's boardrooms, strategies, headlines. Jalen still worked long shifts, bandaging strangers, comforting grief, brewing weak hospital coffee. But between them, no confusion, no pretending. Just mornings that started with his arms around her, evenings with takeout on the couch, and the occasional Paris postcard taped to the fridge. Flashback, Paris that first night. She told him, "I don't believe in accidents." And he replied, "Then maybe I was meant to miss that gate." Back to present. They sat in a quiet diner. No suits, no cameras, just toast and sunlight. Celeste leaned across the table. "There's something I've been thinking about." "Tell me," Jalen said, wiping syrup off his chin. "What if we did this forever?" "You mean breakfast?" She smiled. "I mean the life, the love, all of it. No jets, no press, just us." He didn't blink. "I've been doing forever since the second you said stay." She reached into her purse, pulled out a tiny blue box. Not diamonds, not branded, just soft velvet trembling in her hand. "Marry me, Jalen." He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He stood, walked around the table, knelt beside her like the world had gone quiet again. "Only if we write our own vows and fly economy, sometimes just to remember where we started." They laughed, they kissed, and somewhere, maybe across the ocean, a plane flew overhead. But this time, no one missed their gate. Epilogue. The Paris jet was never rescheduled. They auctioned it. Proceeds went to the hospital where Jalen worked. They built a new pediatric wing, named it the Little Prince Pavilion, and above the entrance in Celeste's handwriting, "What is essential is invisible to the eye." Because love doesn't always arrive on time. Sometimes it boards the wrong plane.